Hey, peace and blessings, everyone. You're now locked in with the baddest chaplain on the globe, Chris B. Once again, thanking you so much for subscribing to us on YouTube, on baddestchaplain.substack.com, Spotify, Apple, any and everywhere where you get podcasts. Our guest today is a dear friend of mine, founder and president of Access2Success, Andrew Lovedale. Access2Success, also known as A2S, is an interdenominational Christian mission organization. A2S is dedicated to playing its part to eliminate poverty and provide hope through education and opportunity. Andrew, thank you so much, man. Welcome to the podcast. How are you, brother?
I'm doing well. Great to be on here, Chris. Thanks for the invite. This is awesome. Thanks for all that you do.
Oh, likewise, man. The feeling is mutual, my man. Like, thank you.
Yes.
So I want to walk through the journey with you, man. Like, tell me first and foremost, how your faith leads your work at Access2Success. Talk about how that faith intertwines with it.
No, my faith is very foundational. Growing up at home, this is something that my parents did not take lightly, and I'm so thankful for that because they instilled in us these values and one thing that I've learned in my short stay here is that the seasons of life does not respect your calling, right? It happens to us all, and my faith drives everything that I do because I'm a child who I would say I've been raised by strangers, right? I set out and I left home when I was barely 13 years old in England, and I've just been raised by community, and I've just been raised through the God's providence. And so when I look at myself, I really do believe with the whole of my heart that every step I've taken in life has been a step of faith. And that step of faith is not knowing what's on the other side, but trusting God. And when you have traveled the type of journey that I've traveled, you realize that when you have very little, right, God becomes your ultimate source. So I've learned to look to Him for everything, and I know what that has done for me. And so with Access2Success, this is very fundamental and foundational in terms of how we get to love on the children. What better way to love on the children than to really love on them the way Christ has encouraged us to do?
Come on.
And in this world today, where people focus so much on what the basic needs are, we at A2S, we're thinking beyond basic needs, right? We're thinking about how do we raise godly stewards in this age and time? And so how do we raise kids who will get to become doctors, but they become doctors with a purpose? They get to be engineers with a purpose. Right. And I do strongly believe that there's physical lack, there's material lack, but the biggest thing, especially where I come from in Nigeria, is that we need good leaders. And beyond good leaders, we need godly leaders, and I like to say godly stewards. And and so, in terms of how we do ministry, it's very important to me and to our team that we raise godly stewards, right? And we want to do that in such a unique way, and you can't do that without faith. And so in this journey that I've traveled, I continue to learn that if we can just raise children who can honor God with their time, their talents, and their treasures, and it doesn't matter where they are, that is just as foundational as it is, right? To be able to think about where you are as a 12-year-old, where you are as a 15-year-old, where you are as an 18-year-old, and learning to really honor God with your time, your talents, and treasures. That allows you to be godly stewards, right? He that is faithful in little will be faithful in much.
Come on.
And so for us, that is very important, so that as our kids start to develop the agency that they need, that it is geared towards really transformational change in a way that truly reflects Christ. And I'm a product of that type of love from strangers. My story is one where God has turned so many strangers into friends, and I dare say family. And I know what it means to walk in faith and to get to see God's hand in everything that I do through the good seasons and the not so good seasons of life. And what a beautiful journey it is. It's not always easy. You have to go through the valleys and the highs. But when you know that Jesus is in the boat with you, whether he's
Come
laying
on.
or whether he's standing, telling
Right.
saying, "Peace be still." But,
That's it.
just my faith, I'm comforted knowing that Jesus is in the boat.
Right.
And
Right.
what a unique gift to be able to pass on in ministry to the children that we serve.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love this sense of having the like comfort of knowing Jesus is in the boat, even if he's
Yeah.
taking a nap.
Yep.
He's
Yeah.
still on the boat. I love that.
Yes, sir.
I love that. I love that. I love that. You know, you've talked a lot about the need to educate yourself about the world and its cultures. And as I read that quote from you, I thought about so many people who haven't had that opportunity to interact with people from different cultures. Like they live in a homogenous area, or they haven't had the opportunity to travel and really immerse themselves in another culture. That hasn't been your
Yeah.
story. You know, I love this. It's a very poetic phrase, like
Yeah.
sort of being raised by this community of strangers. How has your journey going from Benin City to London to Davidson informed your worldview and expanded your empathy? Because I think about those three cities couldn't be more different.
Yeah. You're right.
Couldn't be more different. How has that informed you being in these different places and thriving in all these places? How has that informed you?
I mean, I think you get to learn about history, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You get to learn about history, and one of the most beautiful thing about life is that we are all products of our environment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we cannot hide from that fact.
Yeah,
And so my environment really shapes my worldview, and the fact that I get to, it's almost taken God's almost taken me and inserted me into other people's story, right?
right,
To see how
right.
that story is being written,
Mm,
and I think through the course of my journey, I've come to understand that uh, we're mostly the same.
yeah.
And when it says that we are all flawed, we are so flawed in so many ways, right? And
Mm-hmm,
and so when I think about it, I think about Benin City, and I think about Nigeria, and I think about the challenge that we have,
right.
and the places where we are so gifted, and I think about England, and I think about the challenges that they have, right?
Right,
And I
right.
think about the US, and I think about the challenges that people have here, but also the blessings that they have,
For sure.
and you start to realize that we are all products of our environment. And the way I like to say this, Chris, is in understanding this is just understanding that, London is one side of the harvest field.
Mm-hmm,
America is another
mm-hmm.
side of the harvest field,
Sure.
right? France is another side of the harvest field.
Right.
So when I look at it like that, you think about the church and you think about the body of Christ and what it looks like as a whole. It's this beautiful tapestry, right? That's made of
Mm,
just different components. And one of the things that I like that my pastor says, he says, God takes the broken pieces of our lives and he fashions it into this beautiful piece of art,
right,
right?
right, right.
And so in my journey, I've come to really understand that people have come a long way in their
Mm-hmm.
history, in their challenges, but really being able to express empathy, being able to identify with the challenges of people, being able to
Mm,
understand why they are the way that they are, and
mm.
then really looking at that first from your own lens.
Right.
I was raised to first look at myself in the mirror,
Yeah.
right?
That's it.
Look at
That's it.
myself in the mirror, and then really being able to step back and understand the gift of grace, right? And
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
understand the gift of grace and what that means, and truly understand that those His mercies are renewed every day, and it's available
Right.
unto each and every one of us.
Right.
And so that's been, I think, in terms of the culture, right? Is being able to insert myself into that story and say, hey, I'm Andrew and I'm here, and this is the baggage that I come with, right?
Come on.
And what's your baggage like? And I
Right.
think that the beauty of it in traveling across these cultures, it's not just to go there and really lament, but to say, hey, we all come with our various baggages, right? But from
That's
my
real.
experience, from being raised on this side of the harvest field, and from you being raised on this other side of the harvest field, how can
Mm-hmm.
I help you travel a little lighter,
For
right?
real. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that is where the educational piece comes in, to be able to
Mm,
use my story to influence the story that God is writing in your life, and for you to
right.
be able to use your story to influence the story that God is writing in my life. That's kind of my perspective on my journey is just understanding that God is doing something. No matter
Yeah.
where you are, no matter where you go in the world, something is happening. And just consistently asking the question, what would you have me do? Why am I
Right.
here? Right. And I think that that's one of the questions that continue to drive me today is why.
Hmm.
A child from Benin City given an opportunity to study in London, right?
Right.
My mom could not have afforded
Come
$100 to make
on.
my passport, let alone
Right.
pay for
Listen.
a flight. Getting an opportunity to come to a school like Davidson and having
Right.
it, you know, forget the fact that I'm a Division 1 athlete and all that. And that is
Uh-huh.
not what's important to me. It's the fact that this child from Benin City received these opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
being able to play basketball professionally and do the things that I've done, man, I was lifted. I like to say I was lifted from grass to grace.
Come on.
But at each point of my life, there's been people who God used to unlock doors.
Yeah.
And what else is there to do with my life, given my story, right?
Hmm.
Given this story that God has written, what else is left to do than to help really ask that question, why me, Lord? Why
Exactly.
this child from Benin City? And why have you gifted me these things? Except He's given it to me so that I can pursue a life of purpose. And just so thankful that He gives us the grace to be able to understand
Mm.
and to be able to seek His wisdom as we kind of navigate our relationship with Him, how
Hmm.
we interact with other people across different cultures. But what a beauty! Um, I mean, I don't take it for granted that I got to travel around the world and got to
Right.
see and got to see people, got to learn about their histories, and I think that once you start to go out there and once you expose yourself to other people's stories and their
Hmm.
cultures, what happens is there's this level of peace, right? That
Hmm.
some of the
Hmm.
things that bother you before bother you less
Right.
because, sometimes you get inundated with information about a people unless
Hmm.
you get to walk with them, unless you get to dine with them,
Come
unless you
on.
get to share in their pain,
Right.
unless you get to walk through their struggles, and then unless you get to really learn how they celebrate, right? And once you are exposed to that, you start to take a step back and say, wow, God, I am so thankful for your grace. I'm so thankful for this huge harvest field that I get to be a part of. And that's just something that is quite humbling for me that I've had
Hmm.
the opportunity to. So some things that would phase doesn't really phase me because it's saying these people are going through this and rather asking the question, God, what would you have me do? Than trying to take matters into my own hands unless He
Right.
directs.
Now, what so much of what you're saying, Andrew, just makes me think about two aspects. One, I think about a tool that is often used to teach people about like diversity. It's called the
Yeah,
cultural iceberg.
yeah,
And what you're sharing is so much beyond the surface. Because I think people, when we encounter people, whether they speak a different language or have different skin color, different culture, we just go into the sense of like, oh, like I can, appreciate the music or like the way
yeah,
they dress or the food they eat. All those things are cool, but it's just surface level. But you're
yeah,
talking about spending enough time with people to like be able to see them as full human beings. And I feel
yeah,
like that's the opportunity that so many people either don't take advantage of or never get a chance to really appreciate. And you're talking about moving around and just like the sense of like forget about being a D1 athlete, even though for the audience's sake,
yeah,
my man he was an incredible basketball player. You know what I mean? Just for the record to be stated, I would say it's something even more so than that. It's just the sort of almost surreal, like overwhelming demonstration of God's grace, in the sense of like, God, like, look at this opportunity that I couldn't have given myself, that my
yeah,
family couldn't have provided me, but you provided for me. It has to lead you to gratitude. When you really
yeah,
think about that sense of, there are other people who could play a sport, there are other people who could
yeah,
like take the test and write the essays, whatever,
yeah.
but God saw fit for you to be in that space. It's incredible,
Yes, sir. No, you're exactly right. And I say on this journey that I'm traveling every day, that question becomes why. But at some
Yeah,
point in my life, that question why was born out of need. God,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've always loved you. God, why would
Hmm.
you take that away from me? God, why would you put us in this situation? Why is it difficult to find a meal?
Yeah,
And then now that same why is now born out of gratitude to say, Father, why? Why me? Why
yeah,
did you put
yeah.
me here? Right? And every time I get to see a child smile, Every time I get to see someone feel comforted, I get a little bit of that answer. Right?
Sure.
He says, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed
Yes.
be thy name, for thy kingdom come on earth as it is
Yeah.
in heaven."
Come on.
And so every time we get to walk in purpose, every time we get to pursue investing in other people, right, we get to say, "Thy kingdom come on earth," right?
Right.
As it is in heaven, because we get to see glimpses of what His eternal glory is like in someone
Talk about
else's
it.
smile, in someone
Yes.
else's comfort. So just truly thankful for this journey that I get to be, like you said, a tool in God's hand, right?
Hmm.
Because He's used so many people to sharpen me. And as I continue to grow and I continue to really be, tap into that grace that He grants unto me every day to be able to
Yeah.
think about, God, what would you have me do? And why have you given me these gifts that you have given me across cultures? And
Hmm.
I don't take it for granted.
You can't take it for granted.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
it's too much of a gift. I'm right there with you.
Yes, sir.
Talk to me a little bit about how your experience as an athlete informs your ministry. And I ask this because I think about in scripture, like, Paul talks about our faith like this marathon, right? You have to
Yeah.
have endurance, and there's so many of the skills that you have to be an athlete, in the Division 1 level, on the professional level, that really translates to like life skills in terms of like discipline and
Yeah.
structure. How has, your sort of athletic preparation lended itself to your ministry?
I kind of liken it to, the things that you focus on, right? The things that you focus on, there's a goal.
Hmm.
And, at the beginning of the year, you set your goal. And as a team, we all have the roles that we need to play to
Right.
ensure that that is a success. And I liken ministry to that, right? Is really understanding that for every time I get to train, the things I focus on, the things I feed on, these things will really expand my a capacity, or what you
Right.
would say. I came into Davidson 187 pounds. You probably didn't notice that, right?
Yes.
But somehow they got me in the gym, fed me right,
Right.
and
That's it.
I started to gain muscle. With training
That's
you
it.
gain muscle, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
you start to realize that there's so much that your body can do, right?
Of course.
There's so much that when you're there and you're not training and you're not subjecting your body to
Right.
those things, you don't realize the expansion that can take place, right?
Hmm.
The endurance that you can build from conditioning. And so when you think about ministry, that's how I think about it. Is I think
Uh-huh.
about the things that we engage in, the things that we feed our hearts and our souls, the relationships that we build over time, the role that we get to play in the story that God is writing, how that ultimately builds our endurance,
No
right?
doubt.
How that ultimately, requires the discipline to make sure that we continue to do what He's put us here to do. And so when I think about myself as an athlete, I think about just how that concept helps, but also to dwell in community.
Hmm.
You're nothing without community,
That's the
right? and,
truth.
and and so some of the greatest influences in my life today are my teammates in
Yeah.
college, right?
Yeah.
And I say that we pushed each other, we loved on each other, but we also held
Hmm.
each other accountable. And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was because we had a goal in mind, right, to run the race.
Hmm.
And so when I think about that teamwork, I think about what goes into building a team, about into what setting a goal and working towards that goal. And no matter the outcome, still sticking together, right? And you think
Yeah.
about the brotherhood and you think about the love, right? And you think about now, when you look at the impact, everything that my teammates are doing, you can't slack because everyone is running their race
That's
and doing
it.
such, and so you feel inspired, right? And so as a Division 1 athlete, those same things are so true in ministry, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You have a race to run, and as you're running this race, the most important thing to understand is that it's not about the feeding of the children at
Hmm.
A2S. It's not about their clothing. It's not about even educating them. What's most important is what they see when they look ahead,
Yeah.
right? And so it's just being a reflection of what to the best extent that you can, of
Mm.
what Jesus asks us to be for those who are coming behind us, right? To
Right.
to ensure that there's a path, to not be that. I always like to say to my team, do not be the one that breaks the chain,
Come
right?
on, for real though. Yeah,
Do
for
not be
real.
the one that breaks the chain. And something coach would always talk about is when you meet somebody from Davidson who played 20 years ago and you sit with them, it seems like you're talking to someone you played with, right?
Yes, right, right,
Because
right.
they did not break the chain, so you are
Yeah,
standing on the ground that was built by someone else, right? And so you never want to break the chain because there are people coming behind you, and you want to be the best version of yourself so that there's a positive reflection in front as they continue to travel. So being a Division One athlete, the things that your body is subjected to, the thing about teamwork, the thing about leadership, all of those things translate. And for me,
yeah.
what's so important is that all those times where I woke up early in the morning, I keep thinking, man, why do I have to wake up so early to work out? And now I
Mm.
realize that I was being prepared for this, right? I can wake up
Yeah.
at any time during the morning and just go, right? And,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
so it did build me up for ministry in such a unique way. But the concept around teamwork and the concept around
Come on.
community
Yeah.
becomes even inherent because God made us to do community,
Oh, no doubt.
and I do think that part of the plan of the enemy is usually to isolate us from the herd. But so
Precise.
constantly living in community and building community and doing your part to ensure that community thrives long after you've left the harvest field.
There you go.
These things, you can talk about basketball, but I think when I look back at the gift that coach gave me, I
Mm.
realized that it was so much more than basketball,
Of
right?
course.
And those 4 years of my life prepared me for a lot of what I am getting to do today and to deal with today. And what a unique gift, right?
Yeah.
What a unique gift. There's so many Division One athletes that have had um, different experiences, but I was
No
put
doubt.
in a position where I got to learn and I got to grow and get to understand that doing things the right way pays, and what better way to learn how to do ministry than having to go through this series of adventure where you get to see the ups and downs of doing things the right way, but ultimately learning throughout the process.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm listening to you, Andrew, and I just keep thinking about just how amazing it is that God will have you take on like a particular task or a particular assignment or a particular season, and the skills that God is developing in you translate to like your vocation, right?
Yeah,
So like you being a good teammate, like I don't know, setting a screen for
yeah,
someone. You
yeah,
didn't think about like how that was going to prepare you for ministry. Like just like I'm just
yeah,
running the play, and it's
yeah,
just like I'm just really in awe listening to it because I just think about how God will just put us in these. And maybe there's sometimes you're like,
yeah,
why am I doing this? But it's
yeah,
really God who's outside of time looking at the whole line of from start to end of your time on earth and being like, oh, you're going to need this in order to do that thing like
yeah,
20 years later. It's
yeah.
incredible. It's really
Yeah.
incredible.
No, we are called to die to self, right? And what
Yeah.
better way to do it than to first do it on a team, right? And
Yes.
and and the beauty of being on a team is that when you start to think about yourself, right, the
Mm,
team starts to go in a different direction.
yeah.
So we are called to do that every single day.
No
We're
doubt
called
about
to
it.
do that every single day, to die to self and to really open ourselves up for God's will
Yeah.
upon our lives, right? I once heard this thing from a minister who says the instruction for your next assignment is depends on your obedience to your last to the last assignment that you were
Talk
given,
about
right?
it.
So
That's the truth. That's really the truth.
yeah, so just as I'm traveling through life, right, getting to
Mm,
understand that we are products of our environment, and it's been one layer after another, and God has every place that He's put you, He's using that to kind of shape or prepare you for what's to come. And sometimes we can
yeah.
lose sight of that,
No doubt.
but just thankful for His grace that has allowed me to kind of stay the path and continue to see His hand over all my affairs.
100%,
Mm.
100%.
Mm.
Yeah, I want you to tell me a bit more about. You have another quote that I uh, uh, came across in my research where you talk about this whole notion of it's important to act locally in order to impact globally, and just say more about that, because as you say this, where my mind goes is the hundreds, if not thousands, of churches who would rather travel across the world to do some sort of mission trip when there's hungry people across the train tracks in their town, or across on the south side of their city. I just want to hear more about, like, what allowed you, or how did you arrive at this point of saying, you know what, if I'm going to impact the world, it has to start here. Like talk about that within your own journey and context.
No, I think a huge piece of that, mom would always say charity begins at home,
Right,
right?
right.
Charity begins at home, but also I do understand that there's discernment in everything, right? You
Mhm.
have to discern where God is calling you to go as a ministry,
Right.
but for us is really understanding that there's a need here as well. My ministry is focused in Nigeria, and we
Yeah.
have so many people here who are supporting that ministry in Nigeria. And so, a question that I actually get asked a lot is, why should I care about the children in Nigeria when there are kids
Sure.
in our backyards, right? So,
Yeah.
there's people, there are people who do really want to do missions at home. But there are also people who might lose sight of what is happening at home and
No
focus
doubt.
internationally. Um, and so what I always say the church is one body.
Right.
The church
Right.
is one body. But also, like, not, Molly and I, we focus a lot on the kids in Nigeria, but we also know that there are needs in Davidson.
No doubt.
And so I always say, to think about it and see where God is leading you to sow that seed of ministry,
Mm.
but also understanding that there are needs around you. But when I think about this, Chris, I also understand that um, what we consider poverty, oftentimes, it's there's a lot of material poverty, but also you have spiritual poverty, right? Like, we
No
are
doubt
not,
about it.
we are not all. So what we consider poverty, there's poverty of the mind,
Yes.
and so most times we get stuck on the needs of people physically, which is great, but as a church, like, focusing wholly on what matters, right?
Hmm.
It's really understanding how do we navigate these spaces as a church. So, for example, my answer is always, I'm not ever asking you to stop looking around and seeing what's needed here, right? I will always say I actually want to advocate for kids who are here, but you can consider making A2S your global partner of choice,
Right.
right? And so that way you're doing ministry at home, but you're also looking at the other side of the harvest. You're
Hmm.
also looking at the other sides of the harvest field that you might be called to. So I do think that ministry done well is actually ministry that looks inwards, but
Mm.
and looks outwards as well, because there's need here and there's need abroad.
Yeah.
But also, you can't focus on the need abroad and not see what the needs are at home,
Right.
right? And you can't focus on the needs. So I think, in order to really invest in the whole church, you think about the journey of Paul, right?
Hmm.
Around when he was doing ministry, right? There was that sense of home, but the sense of brethren beyond borders, right? And so, how do you get to do church in a way that you get to serve on both sides of the harvest field? And
Yeah.
I always pray for an exchange, right? I do think that when people are able to go to Nigeria, for example, there's something about their faith that gets unlocked, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And when people are able to come to the US, there's something about, or interact with Americans, right? There's something about their faith that gets unlocked, right?
Yeah.
And these might be things about the gospel or ministry that is unique to these different sides of the harvest field,
Uh huh.
right? So how can these stories? So I do think that there's an enrichment that happens, but it can't be focused on one side, right? It can
Right.
be you can't say, oh, we're just going to do international stuff and neglect our brothers and sisters here in the US. But
Right.
how can we do ministry where the whole church, through discernment, can really
Mm.
figure out where's God's calling us to serve at home, or where's God calling us to serve abroad? Because unless charity begins at home, right, you cannot really fully express it abroad, right? So that's where that's coming from, and just getting people to engage themselves locally, and then as they continue to create global impact as well.
Yeah, I'm here for that. I love that you said that sometimes people will just ask you that directly, in the sense of, why should I care? Like, it almost sounds silly to ask, like, why should I care about kids in Nigeria? It's like, because they're children. It's a novel thought. But talk to us about the challenges children in Nigeria face.
No, I can start to tell you about the hunger, or I could tell you about hunger, or I could tell you about insecurity, or I could tell you about the things that oftentimes we focus on. But Chris, where my heart really is that there's nothing like when you're robbed of the divine gift of choice. When God made us, one of the unique things He gave us was the gift of choice,
right?
And that you and I have the ability to make choices, right? And He's giving us a path to make sure that we make God honoring choices. But there are also different ways to make God honoring choices, right? Where and I think that material poverty robs people of that unique gift, the ability to own your own God story, to say, to develop the agency that you need, right? To say, this is what God has called me to do.
Right.
And so when I think about our kids in Nigeria, I think about my choice. It was not coming to the US, was not what I wanted. Right? It was what I had to do to survive.
Sure.
Right? And so many people who are migrating to the US or migrating around the world, it's not what they want to do. It is what they had to do, because they did not have the choice.
Right.
And so when we think about our kids and we think about what their challenges are, Nigeria has, I think, the second most people living in poverty, the most kids right now in the world who are currently out of school. But the thing is, like, these kids cannot make choices. And because they cannot make choices, they cannot develop the agency that they need so that they can become the godly stewards that I talked about earlier. So again, right? So I think those challenges are challenges that I went through, not knowing where food was going to come from, right? Not really knowing if I was going to pay the next day, pay tuition, and getting to see my mom have to navigate that as a widow, right? And so I could give someone peanuts and they would be celebrating me, instead of saying, they would be celebrating me instead of saying, hey, this is going to hurt me down the road, right? Or and I think sometimes I take it for granted, right? And I take the fact for granted where I could just sleep at night. I turn on the faucet at my home and I say, well, I'll just take a bath tomorrow. I'll just take a bath early in the morning, whatever. And then you realize that growing up in Nigeria, we had one tap and almost 60 people shared that tap. The water only came on once every 2 weeks.
Right.
And so sometimes you had to give up sleep because you were just waiting just to fetch 1 gallon of water so that the whole family can share, right? And so you don't have a choice, right? You just kind of live on the brink of life every day, constantly trying to survive, right? And so for us, beyond thinking about the hunger and all that stuff, is how do we take kids from survival mode to a place where they can thrive, right? And I think that for us, that is really key. Is the 3 key things for me, as I say this, is we're thinking about how do we develop agency in children? How do we restore that gift of choice? And ultimately, how do we raise godly stewards? Because they are going through so much. A child waking up in the morning and not knowing where their next meal would come from. A child not able to go to school because they can't afford tuition, right? And think about this, Chris. A lot of children will graduate. If they manage to graduate, they can't even get jobs. So you could be in Nigeria,
That
right?
part.
And sometimes your cab driver could be an engineer, right? And so
PhD, right?
yeah, so the job that a lot of graduates are trying to do because there are no jobs is people are trying to be Uber drivers, right? And
Yeah.
and so for us is thinking about how do we help them? How do we again, something you probably don't know is Nigeria is projected to have 319 million people, which will put it only behind India and China by
Yes.
2050 in terms of the population.
Right.
Right now, only 3% of the country is 65 years and above,
I was
right?
wondering about that. Yeah.
And so you have over children aged between 0 and 30 years of age,
Yeah.
right? Right now make up 70% of the Nigerian population.
70%.
Yeah, and so you add 150 million kids between now and 2050. So those kids that are being born today, they will be between 0 and 27 years of age, which means that the workforce is not going to shrink. It's only going to get bigger.
Larger.
And
Yeah.
so how do we prepare our kids so that they can actually be ready for what is to come, right? For
Right.
this explosion in the population numbers, right? And so not seeing it as a negative, but saying, okay, what's the opportunity here, and how can we prepare our kids for what is to come, so that they can develop the gift of choice. And we can restore that gift of choice and help develop the agency that they need. As Davidson will say, right, not just to prepare them for the jobs that exist today, but for
Future job.
to create the jobs that will exist tomorrow in
Right.
that environment. But ultimately, for me, is I always tell the kids, and I say, we are not breaking the cycle of poverty for you so that you can make money. We're breaking the cycle of poverty for you so that you can live your life as ministry, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
constantly hounding them and saying it's ministry over money,
Yeah.
ministry over money, because sometimes when you're poor, you keep thinking, oh, I just want to get rich and have as much money as I can. But for us, we're saying we want to break this cycle so that you can you can chase purpose, that you can honor God with your time, your
Yeah.
talents, and your treasures. But the life of an average child that I see every day, Chris, we have 240 kids that come through our after school academy,
Right.
and each child has just under $1 to their name.
My goodness.
So
Yeah.
now think about living on $30 a month,
Right.
and I'm so thankful that we get to bridge the gap for so many of the children,
Mhm.
to the extent that the Lord allows. So yeah.
That's it. No, it's
Mhm.
extraordinary because so much of what you're saying makes me think, and I forget who the quote is attributed to, but it's the whole sense of, you know, when people think about what it means to be wealthy, and they think it means like a whole bunch of stuff, like you have cars, you have a yacht, or a bunch of property. But it's really, you talk about it in terms of choices, but it's also just the gift of time, right?
Yeah.
Like you have time, you have space to say, I'm gonna do this today, or I'm not going to do that, because like it's still going to be okay. My needs are going to be met if I just
Yeah.
decide to stay in my home and watch television all day. I'm
Yeah.
still going to be able to feed my family, and water will be running and all that stuff. And I don't think people um, truly have a deep sense of like understanding of how on the global scale that's not an everyday experience to be able to
Yeah.
say, oh, I can have hot and cold water today,
Yeah.
and I can turn on the water in my bathroom and in the
Yeah.
kitchen, and it's gonna be fine. You know what I
Dude, man,
mean?
I'm so thankful to God, man, because everything around me is a miracle.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
say that from the depths of my heart.
Right.
Everything around me is a miracle. I personally do not like waste, right? And
I
and
get you.
so I see these things, like I told you, turning on the tap, right? Like sometimes I walk into the house and just having electricity,
That's it.
having electricity. And growing up, man, like you had to start ironing your church clothes on
Yeah.
like Thursday, because
Right.
the light comes on for
That's the
five
truth.
seconds
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I gotta get this, and it goes off,
It
right?
goes
And
off. Yeah.
there's certainly a lot for me to be given the environment I came from in Nigeria. So
Right.
much is a miracle around me. And so for me, like you talk about stuff, so whatever it is that I have, Molly and I try to be very, we try to use it as a ministry,
Yeah, of course.
Whether it's a home, whether it's a car, whatever it is that you have, you can use it to serve other people.
Yeah.
And that is in its essence for me, is knowing that these things are going to go away someday. These things
Listen.
they are perishable, but what is not perishable is just the gifts of Him that you get to carry with you all day.
Yeah.
And someone once said to me, right, if if your titles, if your degree, if everything gets stripped from you,
Talk about it.
if all these things that people identify with about you,
Right.
if they get stripped from you, then who really are you? When you look yourself in the mirror without
That's it.
any of your titles and accomplishments,
That's
do
it.
you have an identity?
Right.
And so that forms the foundation for me, and just it's so much beyond stuff, and it's all about ministry and really pursuing God's purpose. And again, I always ask the question, why?
Of course.
Because nothing, I feel like, how you're living a dream, right? Like,
right.
Yeah, nothing in my life feels real.
Of course.
And I have God to thank for that, but also it's a reminder to give it all back to Him.
That's it. That sounds like the foundation of being a good steward right there. Is this understanding of, I'm not going to take for granted any of these things,
Yes,
and
sir.
I don't have these things just for myself, right?
Yes, sir.
That's really where it is. So Andrew, talk with us a little bit about, outside of, the remarkable work that you do, how do you like to spend your time? Like what does rest look like for you?
That rest for me right now looks like hanging out with those two little boys.
Yes. I hear you.
I really just enjoy my boys. And I enjoy them in such a special way, like, because they are just gifts. They have so much energy. My coach always said the two greatest gifts that you can give to anyone is the gift of your time and love. And Chris, I was raised in an environment where fathers did not really know how to give time.
Talk about that. Yes.
Fathers did not know how to give the gift of time, and they loved you. My dad loved me. My dad actually spent some time with us compared to most African fathers. Right. But the father in Nigeria is born to provide, and so oftentimes they are just in that state of, I need to provide for the family. And they're never around, and on their way home, I mean, dad used to come, he's on his way home from work, and he stops by my mom's younger brother's home, and they sit outside and just chat till like 7. He comes home, how was school today? He takes his shower, he goes to bed, right? Like, and so we got love, and he provided, but with time wasn't, and I think that that's something that's hopefully changing, but and so for me, that's something I try to prioritize with my kids is that gift of time. So it's parenting is not work for me. It's such a privilege.
That's real.
Right. And
real.
So I love time with them. That's one thing I enjoy doing is getting to pass on whatever little I know about life and to share that with them as they start to discover their own path in the story that God is writing in their own lives. And something I certainly do not take for granted. I play Xbox. I only play FIFA. I only play FIFA, and that's about it for video games. So when I really need to rest, and then obviously, I'm an Arsenal fan. So Saturday mornings before the kids wake up, I try to catch in the game if it's, but yeah, that's mostly what I do is time with family, with Molly and I being so busy, being very intentional about time as a family. But yeah, it's that's what I do for fun, and then to also rest. My time with family is rest, and then obviously other time is just really time to commune with the Father, right? The quiet time to step away every day and just and just to be in His presence. But those things are refreshing for me. They they are rejuvenating, and we're blessed by just a community of mentors of so my time with people is what I consider rest, really.
I get
just
you.
being able to fellowship and learn from each other is how I get to rest, and then ultimately time with the boys. But yes, sir.
I love that. I had to laugh at you playing FIFA. I was like, why are we living the same life right now? I'm getting up early on Saturday to watch City.
Yeah,
but to each his own. I get Arsenal.
I know. You guys are a few points behind us right now. You better stay there.
Listen, I try to tell all my friends who watch Premier League. You know how City is. The season doesn't start until Boxing Day. Then they're like, oh, we better go ahead and win this title.
I know, right? I know. Yeah. Hopefully, we've made enough adjustments to keep the streak going. We have our eyes on you guys. That's for sure.
Listen, y'all just got keep running. Just keep running. Don't look back. Cause we coming.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, it's awesome.
What has been a time in your life, or even just localizing it to this season, that has made you feel a deep sense of gratitude or awe? Like, what has been something that's happened, or just the season itself that has led you to say, wow, this is leading me to gratitude?
For me, there's one story that stands out. So many times I'm working behind the scenes, and I was in Nigeria this summer with a team from the US, and we had our vacation Bible school, and usually at the end of it, that's when the kids get their school supplies for the year. And it's usually very chaotic, right? Because the kids are very excited, and so I was doing something else. Everyone was distributing backpacks to the children, and as I stepped out, this girl, her name is Marvelous. She just started charging towards me, and when she came, she hugged me.
Wow, yeah.
And it was just this kind of hug where she wasn't letting go. And she wasn't letting go. And then the next thing I bent to look, and she was in tears.
Come on.
And I was trying to let go. And the next thing, man, like, this girl started praying over me. I'm talking about the kind of very intentional, powerful prayer. I mean, she was saying stuff like, "You will never know lack."
Come on.
And praying over my children, and in just words that I can't even. I don't want to do a disservice to the way she prayed. At some point I just realized that something was happening, and I just stopped and just started saying amen to this profound prayer. I think she's 12 years old.
Come on, right.
And all the other kids then noticed that she was there with me, and so think about 20 to 25 kids just charging towards you. And they ran towards me, and as they were running towards me, they were trying to run and hug me to say thank you. But they met Marvelous in prayer. And all of a sudden, there were 20 to 25 kids. They stopped in their tracks, and I was surrounded. I was in the middle of these children, laying their hands over me and just praying and saying amen. And I just stepped away from that, and it was an emotional evening for me. And every time I still think about it, I realized that what a unique gift it was to have these children pray over my life, pray over this ministry for me. I mean, this prayer was not just over my life and this ministry. They prayed over my children.
My goodness,
they prayed over my children, and I just stood there in awe and saying amen to every word. And think about it when you say from the mouth of babes, right?
That's it.
And I just stood there and I took it in. So when I think about this season, I think about just that gift that it's not something that money can buy, that these children, Jesus says, suffer not the little children to come unto me.
There you go.
And in some way, like, I just felt the power of their prayer, the power of the words of these innocent children over my life. And when you talk about gratitude, every time I think about it, I say amen.
That's it. That's it.
I get to say amen because their prayer, it's gone before me. And however the Holy Spirit laid that in that young girl's heart that day to begin that, it's something that I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that, sometimes you feel like, oh, you're giving, but really you are the one receiving.
That's the truth.
And so just receiving that priceless gift, I get to be thankful for that because, dude, man, it still keeps me speechless. But
I mean, yeah, extraordinary.
It is. It was just so organically powerful.
Come on.
And so when I think about my year, when I think about this year and the season that we are in, I think about that story and what a unique way to go back on my knees and not ask for anything, but to say thank you, God, and to say amen. Right. And it all starts with Jesus, right? It all starts with his unique gifts, the sacrifice that he made, especially in this season of Christmas, right? The unique gift that he is, that he was made flesh and dwelt amongst us, and just his sacrifices that continues to be a story that children and the old and everyone gets to tell today is a blessing. And as I think about Christmas, that is the story that I'm thinking about that special gift that just makes up. It just accounts for everything that I feel like God has done in and through me this year.
Mm-hmm. No, I am just blown away by that story. Mm-hmm. Like that, just I think it hits me, as a former classroom teacher, just thinking about 12-year-olds, like middle school age, for them to express that level of like gratitude and then like taking up a notch, praying for you, like almost like prophetically praying for you. It's just like, man, like that's just like remarkable, man. That's
yes, sir.
Hold on to that for the hills and the valleys. You know what I mean? Like that's a one.
I am, brother. I am.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question I ask all of my guests. I want you to imagine that you're hosting a dinner. And you can invite 4 guests. They can be dead or living, fictional or real people. Andrew, who are you bringing to this dinner?
That's a good one. First that comes to mind is Jesus, actually. I want him at that dinner because, I feel like he went through so much on earth and he's left this blueprint for us. And, I always say that I have a ministry that's worth telling Jesus about. I don't want to see him and be like, I just lived my life and I didn't hang out with people because I didn't want my yoke to be linked to theirs. I'm here and I feel like that's such a boring story, right? And but I want to hopefully meet him one day and say, hey, Jesus, I know what it's like to be betrayed. Right? I know what it's like to go through little. I know this. I know what it felt like when you fed the 5,000, right? And to be able to say thank you for leaving these stories behind and for using the Holy Spirit to inform my journey. And so I'm excited. He would be one that I would love to have at that table. The next person I'd love to have is my dad. My dad passed when I was very young. He had hopes and dreams for me. And one thing that is very, very important in a Nigerian home is your family name. Right? The name Lovedale. And so, I don't really hear a lot of people talk about it here, but everybody, no matter how rich or poor you are in Nigeria, you have to honor the family name. Have to, and that was something that my dad would say, we are Lovedales, right? And I still say the same thing to my kids. I say, we are Lovedales. We don't do this, right? And so just having to travel through life without him, in the manner that I have, and knowing how much he wanted for me. It would be nice to kind of have him at that table to be able to share stories, and just really thank him, and also to just talk about how much I miss him, but how much you can spend a lifetime with somebody and get nothing, and you can spend a few with someone, and their legacy and the things that they teach you drives you. And Dad, for the short time he was here with me, really informed my journey. The next one would be my mom.
Yeah.
My mom, because when you talk about a strong woman, my mom has made so many sacrifices, man.
No doubt.
She has made so many sacrifices, having to lose her husband and having all these children to raise. She did it without complaining. She did it without complaining. She did it with so much humility. And she managed to keep God at the center. And so many things happen in life that just really rocks your faith. And my mom is the greatest example of going through adversity, still holding on to Christ.
Come on.
Right. And sometimes adversity tends to push you away, but seeing how my mom went closer to Christ because of adversity,
right,
and that ultimately shaping our stories in such unique ways. Man, I look at my mom. Chris, you don't understand, man. Like, I look at my mom today, and I just shake my head, man. How did you do it, mom?
Right,
and just the strength of a mother, and really just understanding all that she had to navigate. Some of it we knew of, some of it we didn't know.
Right.
But now that you're older and the tales continue, it's almost like a non-ending, a book of tales, right? And you're like, Mom, that happened? You went through that? And she's like, well, I couldn't tell you that. At the time, I didn't want you guys to get your spirits down, or and so it makes the testimony all sweeter. But just being able to look her in the eye and say thank you, I think that that for me would be really cool. And last is Molly, really.
Oh, get you.
There's no dinner without Molly.
I get you. I respect it, as you should.
Yeah, just the smartest, strongest woman I know. She's the one who doesn't need to be behind the scenes, but she just thrives, and she works hard, she loves hard, she makes sacrifices. But my ministry is not possible without her, right? And just getting to walk through that journey with her is being such. I talk about ministry, talk about teammates, talk about, right, and she feels like a culmination of all my stories together, right? Having that person that you get to do life with on a daily basis. That would be the 4 for me. I have other people that I'm torn about, like, oh, this person should be in Chris's list, but those 4, just because of the unique role that they play just in my journey. And the dinner, I don't want the dinner to necessarily be about me. I want to see how they would interact with each other at a table. Right. Because Dad hasn't gotten to meet Molly, right? And
come on.
And so getting to see what that dinner would look like, me getting to, and all of us getting to look to Jesus and getting to share our faith journey with him is ultimate. And then getting to really have Mom talk to Dad about, I just want to tell you how I did it, right? Like,
that's it.
This is what you missed. And then for her to look at Jesus and say, thanks for letting me latch on, right? And then also looking to Molly and saying, thank you for coming along this journey. And my mom calls Molly treasure, right? And
I love that.
And so it's just doing dinner with those 4 would be just a blessing of a lifetime.
Love it.
Because it's the dinner I never got to have, right? If you have if you have a wife, you hope that they get to break bread with your father and your mother. And
Yeah,
I never got to see that. And so I would love to have that dinner, and then with Jesus at the head of the table.
of
Of the table.
course. Of
Yeah.
course. No, that's lovely, man. I like that a whole lot, whole lot. I think for the end of the year, I'm going to post various clips of people answering this question because
Yeah.
just in mental calculations, I think Jesus might be tied with Dr. King
Yeah.
on dinner invitations.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You're right. Because there are people I wanted to put there, but I just realized that, people like Dr. King,
Yeah,
people like Coach McKillop in my life,
right.
right,
Of
is
course.
people like Mr. King Mawini or Joe Forber.
Hmm.
What's unique about them is that, you know, they learned what it means to lay your life down for a friend, right? And they
Yeah, yeah,
learned
yeah,
that from
yeah.
Jesus, and that allows
Right.
Jesus to be the ultimate. But yeah, there's so many. I was raised by a village, man.
I love it. I
I
love
was raised by a village, and so many people have such great hands over my life. But
no
in
doubt.
terms of a dinner, these people, it's the one thing you pray to have is your dinner with your spouse and your
Right.
parents, and I
Yeah.
never got that. So
Get you.
yeah, no, that's it's transformational for me to be able to do that.
No doubt about it. No doubt about
Yes,
it.
sir.
And my last question for you today, Andrew, is simply, what is your hope for the world in this moment?
I'm looking at my door right now,
Yeah, yeah. That's real.
and I like a quote on my door that says, "Remember, we are not called to be saviors; we are
Hmm.
called to be stewards."
Yeah.
And I say that because there's so much happening around us. Chris, you have the stuff that you get to go through every day,
Yeah.
and I have the stuff that I get to go through every day.
Right.
Um, there's a reason for every encounter in your life,
That's the truth.
and um, and I like to ask God, like, why did I encounter this person?
Hmm.
And I just hope that we don't waste our encounters. You know,
Come on.
I hope that we don't waste our encounter. Whether you run into someone or someone runs into you at the parking lot,
Right.
whether someone steps on your toe, whether someone in the midst of a conversation, turns it into a heated argument,
Right.
whether you agree with my political ideology or not.
Right.
Um, I hope we don't waste our encounters,
Yeah, man.
because our encounters are supposed to be filling. They're supposed to be life-giving. They're supposed to help us lighten that baggage that we carry.
Mm.
And so when you waste your encounters, the people who are supposed to be a blessing to you are perceived as a curse.
Oh. Mm.
And I think the ultimate destination for every encounter is the gift of love,
Right.
right? And so I hope that we truly, sometimes life happens to us in a way that we look up or we look down,
Yeah, yeah.
and what we forget to do is look around. And our encounters, while we're looking up to God, God is saying, look around and see what I've put in front of you. Look at what is behind you. And those are encounters, our relationship with each other, our
Yeah.
relationship with God, and our relationships with the systems that are put in place, right?
Hmm. Bro.
uh, but ultimately, I just wish that, and I pray that, and I hope that we don't waste our encounters, that
Hmm.
you and I get this hour together, and that, I get to step away thinking, man, I just hung out with Chris for
Yeah.
an hour, right?
Right.
And
Right. Right.
this is an hour that you and I will never have back again, but this is an hour that will say, that hour belongs to us. It belongs
Yeah.
to our time
Certainly.
together. So whether you find yourself in a good situation, you find yourself in an unfortunate situation,
Sure. Sure.
to not waste that encounter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone hits your car, maybe it's an opportunity to strike a relationship, or to strike a
Come
friendship,
on, come
right? Maybe
on.
it's not, maybe the car is just something that, someone can hit your car, but you can also just mistakenly drive your car into the driveway and still hit your car, right?
100%.
Um, and so just really hoping for a world where we don't waste our encounters, because Chris,
Mm-hmm.
you have something to offer me.
Yeah.
That child on the street who has nothing,
Right.
that you might be looking at and saying it's their fault for being poor or they're lazy.
Mm-hmm.
That child
Mm-hmm.
has something to offer you,
No doubt.
right? That person who you're thinking is not part of the community has something to offer you, right?
Yeah.
And so not to displace our encounters or to waste them, but to truly embrace them and to dig deep and find the depths of what that encounter means. I always say with relationships, I hope people do three things: is discern why someone came into your life, right?
Yeah.
Nurture the relationship and periodically evaluate your relationships.
There it
And so
is.
these encounters they're critical to our existence, right? Because God is looking down and he's saying, look at all that I've put around you. Why
Mm-hmm.
waste it?
Right.
Why waste it? He uses everything, he says all things work, all things work for our good, right? Like you think about how he's really fashioned our lives, right? Is that whether it's a good encounter or what you consider a tough encounter, what's really important is that there is an encounter, right? So
Precisely.
to remove the good
Yeah.
or remove the bad, but to remember that an encounter is an encounter,
Yes.
and God can take that encounter and do some beautiful things, with the series just said, I thought so.
I was, I ain't gonna lie, it scared me because I'm listening to you. I thought so. I was like, oh, who's talking on my watch? Because it makes sense what you say. He's like, the beautiful cat. I thought so. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, but truly, brother, I hope that we don't waste our encounters,
Oh,
because
yeah.
if you dig deep enough into most of your encounters, you'll find out that waiting at the end of it is truly that love, right?
Yeah.
The love that knows no bounds, and that brings the peace that surpasses understanding. It
That's
might be
it.
tough to navigate sometimes, certain times, and we're human and we will fail, right? And we will label and we will judge, but to move past the labels, to move past our propensity to judge each other, and to see someone will say, through your eyes, Lord,
Come
right?
on.
Can you learn to see people through God's eyes?
That's
And
it.
can you, when so forced by the world to speak up your mind, can you really fight it and
Yeah.
trust God and speak God's mind? And I think those things are important to me. Speak God's mind instead of instead of your own mind,
Right.
right? And ultimately try not to waste your encounters so that you can fully really see what love is, right? And to feel that. But that's my one hope for the world, and if we can bless each of our encounters and truly
Right.
get to that depth of love, then most of our problems will go away.
I appreciate this so much because to me it also it feels like it's part of God's invitation for us to just slow down and be still. So you get into that bumper to bumper in traffic
Yeah,
and you're so in a rush to do whatever you're going to do, and you're not slowing down enough to just see like, no, God wanted you to meet this person,
yeah,
and whatever mutuality is going to happen there, but we're just so in our own heads running
yeah.
to stand still. I think this is a good word, and I hope that people really just run this back and just listen to everything you said, because it's a sermon, bro. Like, it really is just a remarkable thing you said, and I thank God for it. And I thank God for you, but my goodness, what a thing you just said, man. Thank you.
No, thanks, brother. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I hope we can get the family together soon.
Oh yeah, I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it. Absolutely, it was a joy. Having for those who are listening and don't know, we both have two boys, and we've been
Yeah,
talking since our eldest sons were born. It's like we gotta get them to hang out one day. And now that my boy's 8.5, we finally got a chance for everybody to meet. It's like, yes,
yes, sir. Yes,
let's go.
sir. No,
There
what a
you go.
blessing, man. I thank God for our journeys, and
Yes, yes.
yeah, and it's he's just going to by his grace will continue to do what he's put us out here to do, and thanks for all that you do, man. I'm
Thank
I'm
you, man.
so thankful that you have a platform like this where you can share stories, but ultimately get to live out your own God story.
Yeah, 100%, man.
Yes, sir.
100%. Appreciate you, bro.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Thanks,
And I
brother.
anytime, anytime. And I hope everyone listening and watching, be sure to check all the wonderful work that Andrew and Access to Success is doing. A2sfoundation.org. I'll make sure to put the link in the show notes. Of course, you can watch this on Substack, baddestchaplain.substack.com. It's going to be on YouTube later, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those spaces. But if you want to get it first, you got to subscribe to baddestchaplain.substack.com, and that's where you'll be able to see it. But until next time, God bless you and keep you. You all just continue to just do exactly what God has called you to do. Just slow down, be still, be present, and find a way to love somebody. All right? Much love, y'all.
Amen. Amen. Thanks, brother.
Anytime, anytime.
Yes, sir.